Good morning. How many of you watched the Olympics recently? Well, if you remember the marathon, there was a very special marathon that was run in the 2004 Olympics. It was the 100th anniversary of the modern Olympics, and it was held in Athens, Greece. It started on the plains of Marathon, where the soldier Phidippides ran 26 miles to tell his king, "Rejoice, we are victorious," only to drop dead. So, when they ran the Olympic marathon in 2004, they started it there, and they hit it finish in the original Olympic stadium, the old stadium where the first modern Olympics was held. And of course, the field was phenomenal. You had the world record holder, all the winners of the largest marathons that year, and you had a runner by the name of Vanderlei de Lima from Brazil. Now, Vanderlei was not one of those top runners. So the race starts, and for those of us that have run, and yes, I used to run marathons before clearly I grew out of them, you watch what happens, and when you get to about the 18th mile, you start to see signs. The arms are starting to tighten, the facial muscles start to tauten up, and the pace starts to get a little choppy. Well, just then, you turn and watch the race, and Vanderlei de Lima has a half a mile lead on the rest of the field. And you're thinking, oh boy, here comes his moment, 15 minutes of fame. Well, of course, what happens? You're expecting him to drop back and drop out, but no. A fanatic spectator runs out of the stands, tackles him, and sends him flying to the ground. Now, I can't imagine what it was like to get back up and run, but believe it or not, he did. Bloody knees and so forth. And sure enough, the rest of the pack went by him, and so did everyone in the world's attention. So then let's pan to the finish line of the old stadium. First runner comes in, 100 yards, 200 yards go by. It's not going to be a dogfight to the end. Second runner comes in, 100 yards, 200 yards, looks like he's set for silver. And you're waiting for third place. And who should come in but Vanderlei de Lima in third place? And the crowd goes wild. Bloody knees, bloody elbows. They're cheering and they're hoping against hope that there's nobody in fourth place close enough that could outrun him at the very end. And when it looks like there's going to be enough room, 100 yards, 200 yards go by, what does he do? Instead of complaining, he starts aping his own misery. He holds out his arms like a wounded airplane. And he starts pretending like, how's he going to make it back to the finish line? Sure enough, he finishes in third place. He gets the bronze medal, and he wins the Olympic medal for outstanding sportsmanship. How many of us here as consultants have had our Vanderlei de Lima moment where we've been tackled, and somehow we had to get up and make the best of what goes on? Well, folks, that's what I'm here to talk about today. And I'd like to start by thanking Gail very much, Gail Carson, who really saw something in me long before probably I was ready and thought I'd ever be here to speak. And what I'd like to do is share with you what I'm going to do today. I'd like to talk to you about how I found and grew my best and highest use in my business, how I went after the small business market, and how I used Moxie, Mojo, and my daughter Margot's inspiration to really make my business run high, unfortunately drop into a chasm, but then recover out of the chasm and move on. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm not going to ask you to join a cult, join a program, start a community, drink some secret Kool-Aid, or what have you. I'm just coming here simply to make friends. I'm coming here that if my story of best and highest use can help you in your business, that would be wonderful. And if you like what you see, and you know small business owners, who is my target market, I certainly would love to be remembered to them. So if that's okay with you, I'd like to get started. Okay. I was always a lone wolf. I'm a son of two airline employees. I grew up in New York, Istanbul, New Jersey, and then went on to live in Chicago, Boston, Cleveland, Pittsburgh now, and Nairobi, Kenya. So I've always been sort of a lone wolf. And when I was about 12 years old, I came back and I moved to Westchester County, New York. And this is where kids had long hair, and I had a crew cut, and I had been living in a very different country. And frankly, I was very alienated, I was a loner, and I was getting into trouble. And there's one day I remember vividly where I had the first defining point in my life. I was sitting outside the high school, systematically throwing rocks at the windows of the high school, obviously waiting for someone to come and get some attention, give me some attention. And who should come along but the high school cross-country coach, Shelley Lifton. And instead of sending me to the principal and certainly getting me suspended, he said, why don't you come out and run for the team? Well, to make a long story short, this lone wolf found his calling, and I ended up being an all-county cross-country runner and set some school records and went on to do quite well in that field. But all the time still really sort of being kind of a loner. I went to Boston University, did very well, ended up paying for my own college and was a James Kemper Scholar and went off and ran the school's tutoring program. But again, mostly solitary sorts of things. All the time, really sort of enjoying being plunged into a crazy environment. Was it Turkey? Was it Boston University? And what happened as I got up and got going was I started in my employment. And I became quite good at some very functional things: database marketing, business-to-business selling, direct marketing, and understanding sales processes and developing new products, new markets, and so forth. And I consistently had greater jobs and more senior jobs in smaller and smaller companies. But what was so interesting about that was that every time I hit a performance appraisal, it always started out with, "Andy, you're the brightest, smartest, hardest working, most creative person that's ever worked here, but." And I always wondered whether, I used to finally say, "Listen, if it's not you're fired, then let's go on, but if it's you're fired, that's okay, I understand. You tell the truth too much. You tell the truth. You are too honest, you're impatient, you're not political, and you truly enjoy building things as opposed to maintaining things." So this went on and progressed. And then finally, I had the ultimate dream job, the dream job I always wanted. And that was, I was vice president of sales and marketing of Harris InfoSource. Dream job. Had my Kellogg MBA, I had all this experience, and I was finally in a place where I was doing what I thought I really wanted. And I was miserable. I spent all my time putting out my people's personal problems, arguing or fighting for resources with my fellow VPs, and being in profound disagreement with the strategic direction of the company, with the president of the company. So sure enough, my career ended there by natural causes. I was fired. And they did it the old-fashioned way there. They gave you took the box of what you had and you walked, kind of the walk of shame by your employees. And just then my wife called me and she said that our 9-month-old daughter, Margot, who has cystic fibrosis, this is in 1997, had just developed a staph and a strep infection in her lungs and was being rushed to the hospital. And so on the way to the hospital, I stopped at home, I got the stuff I needed, and I basically looked at my mortgage. And I said, no one will ever do this to me again. And so I started my consulting career. And what I did was, it seemed that I was always starting to mostly identify with business owners. When I worked for a giant franchise organization, the franchisees loved me. When I started consulting at night, one year I actually made more money moonlighting than I did in my day job. So it was almost like this inevitability that I would join and I would go into this business. And so what happened as I started doing all of that was I went through some of the initial things that we all do in business. First of all, you sell almost anything to anybody, okay? I remember one time somebody bought an hour of my time for $90, and it was at 5 in the morning. And when I basically looked, and he said to me at 6 in the morning, he said, Andy, you're a pretty smart guy. I think I'd like to buy another 20 minutes of your time. And what went through my mind was, oh my God, what could I possibly add in value that would be worth another 20 minutes? How could I fill the time up? But things move on and you start to get better and bigger. And I remember there was a time when I was being interviewed by a board to work on a $38 million problem company. Father and son, business not growing. And the chairman of the board, who was a very big player in Cleveland where he lived, looked at me and said, Andy, you're 37 years old. What in God's name makes you think you are ready to help a $38 million company with profound and severe problems? And I looked at him, he's about a 70-year-old man, and I said, you know why I think I'm ready? Because I looked at myself in the mirror this morning, and I finally started to grow hair on my ears. And that means I'm old enough to do this. And he gives me this look, and all of a sudden he says, you're okay. So we went on and on and on. And as things started to work, I realized that I had developed some really cool stuff. I understand very quickly I had to focus on the owner as the accelerant of the growth of business. I could not really work with the president. I recognized quickly that you had to spend and convince the owner that they had 3 jobs. They're the owner, the president, and usually the chief evangelist, the chief salesperson, the chief inventor. And that the more they could start to basically reduce, eliminate, or transfer out the function of president, the better they could do. And what clearly started to happen was I became a therapist to business owners. And in the 450 I've worked with, I started to develop some skills to do this. And I should also say that I learned from so many folks. Gail, Vicki Sullivan, Vic Hunter, Alan Weiss, Leon Danko, Libby, Arthur Hughes, just so many names. My time at Kellogg, I actually worked for Charlie Green 27 years ago at the Mac Group. Go figure, I haven't seen him in 27 years. Our speaker yesterday at lunch. So as you know, as I think Newton said, it's easy to be great when you stand on the shoulders of giants. And I've been very blessed to have been able to learn so much. And as the business started to grow, it got really, really fun and exciting. I got pretty confident. I started selling quite a bit. And as the years started to grow and the hundreds of thousands of revenues started to come in, I started to get confident. And I had a business owner once that, in Cleveland, and he looked at me and he said, you know, Andy, you seem really confident. Can you tell me who your competition is? And I said, frankly, my competition is inertia. And he said, really? Where are they located? I said, they have offices all across the country. So, you know, it got really good. And as I started looking into some of the wonderful things that happened, I started to recognize that I had to develop my own business model. And I did. I basically figured out that you have to spend 1/3 of your time selling, 1/3 of your time delivering, and 1/3 of the time developing your own business. And that was incredibly important if you're going to do it. I learned how to create a one-page proposal that allowed me to basically come in, and once I had built trust, I could close a 50 to even 100K deal on one sheet of paper. I learned to always remember to be in the face and tell the truth and tell the business owner what he or she needed to hear, because nobody else was willing to do it. And then I got a little cocky, because as time got on, I got pretty good. And I remember a client once hired me and he said, Andy, I know we have a contract, but I need a lot more work from you. So can we come in, can we sit down and talk about it? And I said, look, I'd given you 3 proposals. It was like 25, 35, and 45K. And I said, just pick the biggest one. And he said, Andy, let's sit down. So he said, I want this, and I want this, and I want this. And so he said, how much is it going to be? And I said, well, gee whiz, the way you're describing it, instead of it being 45, it's really going to be 60. And he looks at me and says, for gosh sakes, Andy, how in the world can a proposal jump $15,000 in 12 minutes? And I stopped and I thought to myself, I got to really respond to this. And I finally looked at him and said, for goodness sake, sign it quick. Who knows how much larger it's going to get? So, you know, I was getting a little too cocky. And I was getting a little, sometimes even the passion would turn to craziness. But by the same time, I still had a lot of amazing experiences that you can't even make up. 2 partners hire me, sign the contract, hand me a 5-figure check. One of them, we shake hands, and one of them says, you have a minute, I got to talk to you. I said, sure. He said, Andy, there's something I have to tell you. I said, what's that? He said, I need to tell you, I'm sleeping with my partner's wife. Is that going to get in the way of our growing the business together? Now, I'm proud to say that I was able to figure out how to split them into 2 businesses. They never found out, and no, I have no idea where the wife is now. But you can't make this stuff up. I've been on a repo team that had to repossess bingo boxes from a church bingo hall. I've had the chance with a client to ride on a Mardi Gras parade float. And as the years went on, I got a chance to speak in Istanbul, in Amsterdam, in Australia and Sydney. And some of the most amazing things that happened over the years. I had to do, and it was very, very tough, I had to do a termination in Phoenix on 9/11. And my friend Vicky will remember that. And we had to somehow separate him from his computer because he was walking out with all the customer files. And I was doing that while I was watching the corner of my eye, the plane fly into the tower and having it fall on the place I used to work. So, you know, you can't make up the real life, the pathos, and what happens in the world of small business owners. They're wonderful people. They're wonderful people, and what they do so well is they take craziness, they take their own foibles, they take their imperfections, and they take chances and they take risks. And they remind me so much of me. And so as the years have gone on, I've bonded with my marketplace. I've thrived with them, I've soared with them. And I always come back and think about my daughter Margot, who around the years 2006 or so, she would have been about, say, 10. And at first, Margot was kind of a distraction, and then she became sort of a merit badge, and then she finally became an inspiration for me. Because I realized that while my daughter has one fatal incurable disease, you have to go on with your life. You have to make the best of it. So as time went on, what I recognized was with these business owners was I had to have the hard conversations. I had to help them. Now, helping them grow their business, I was very proud of. I've helped over 450 business clients grow their businesses by over $500 million in sales. Real numbers, real results, and I'm very proud of it. I've helped employment, I've helped business growth, and I've made a real difference in folks' lives. And at the same time, I'm known for having a lot of tough love and not really giving anyone a chance. My new friend David, who's the IMC head here, asked me, kind of what did I think of what I saw? And I told him, and he said, oh, that's interesting. Okay, because I call the game, and that's something that over the years I've done, and been pleased to do it. So as I start to look at how all this is playing out, I start to find out, how do I keep this thing and grow it and sustain it? And I made a lot of mistakes starting up. I've learned some hard lessons about myself. I don't build communities well. I started 3 different businesses trying to do that. Connect Space, Independent Entrepreneur, and Andy Birol's Arena. And I just simply learned that my best and highest use is not to do that. So a lot of the models that I saw didn't work. But one model that I saw that I came up with myself, and it was, we all need our own versions of the obvious, is called best and highest use. And it's my version of how you basically figure out what you want to do. What are you good at doing? What do you like doing? And what has the marketplace valued you for doing? And I have written about it. Best and highest use is a registered trademark of Birol Growth Consulting. I've applied it, I've spoken about it, and I've used it. And it's the kind of thing that I'd say to you, you find something in yourself that speaks and resonates, and you start to build on it. Because you'll find that as the things change over time, this really doesn't. So, as we start to go forward in this business, I have the major glory years. And I do believe that in this business, one of the most important metrics, if not the most important metric, is how much are you selling in terms of consulting fees that are being given to you, not for products that you're reselling or something, but how much are you actually being paid ongoing for your value. And I say this with pride, not to brag, but because it's a validation of what I think is the most important thing. I've had 8 years over 400K, 4 years over 500, and my great 2 years over 600 were 2005, 2006. And what was fascinating was during those years, I wrote at least 1 book each year. At one point, I had 17 concurrent clients, and I took a 2-month vacation. So the point is, when you're in this space, it goes back to the running. It's like when you break free from the crowd, from the pack, and if we all watch some of the great Olympic races where Mo Farah broke loose, or we watch of course Usain Bolt just basically say, "This is mine," and take it. But the beautiful thing is, you'll find that there'll be moments in your consulting world where everything's working, and my God, go for it, go for it, make it really work. Now, what happens though is you do come to a point where, you may start to get a little too belligerent. In other words, my contrarianism turns into belligerence. And my good friend Kevin will tell you, yeah, he's seen some of that. And sometimes, basically, it's a question of whether, as a lone wolf, you realize you're not catching every single prey out there, and maybe you're not doing it as well as you should. And I knew that this moment was coming because of a couple of things. I was on a vacation in Australia, and my wife and daughter and I were driving to Hunter Valley, which is the greatest wine in Australia. And I dropped them off, and there's this one place that had amazing Chardonnay. And I had to get some. And they closed at 5, and I come rolling into this old-style vineyard at about 10 of 5. And all the workers were just coming off the vineyards and were sitting on the veranda. And I go blasting in there, so, I'm so glad I got here. I really want to try your wine. Can you please pour me a glass? I intend to buy several cases. Sir, we don't serve wine here. I understand. I just want to try some before I buy a few cases. Sir, we just don't do that. For goodness sakes, I'm an obnoxious American with a lot of money. Just please, let me have some. Put it on the bill. And she says, sir, we just don't do that. And I said, well, excuse me. I'm a famous consultant, author. I have a big following around the world, and I'm going to tell everyone I know never to come back here. And I stalked off, and I slammed the door, and I walked over by the veranda, and all the workers there were kind of shocked I did this. And I was going to make this grand exit, and I get in the car, I slam the door, and I'm going to drive off. And the steering wheel is on the other side of the car. So now I have this really, really, really difficult dilemma. Do I try to crawl over this thing and impale myself on the gear shift, or do I take my own walk of shame and go around? Well, I took my own walk of shame and said, I guess my work here is over, isn't it? And they all kind of agreed with me. But that was kind of a precursor, and it was a precursor because I realized I was starting not to listen as much to myself, and I was starting to project my own baggage onto business owners. And it started to show. Now, just when that was starting to happen, which was all my doing, then I had the third big defining point in my life. And that was in the space of time between 2008 to about last year. The following things happened. My wife, who was an executive with a National City Bank, whose stock was trading at $40, the bank was bought by PNC Bank at $2 a share, which had amazing, amazing impacts on savings and so forth and so on. We had to move to Pittsburgh. We lost a lot of 401k. We had to sell a house at a fraction of what we paid for it. Both of us had some fairly important health issues and scares. The Cleveland business market went to town, started to tank because of the economy. But most of all, my daughter Margot, who at this point is about 13, developed a second unbelievably fatal and incurable disease called abscessus. It's an infection that has no antibiotic that can cure it. So all this starts to happen, and I'm watching so many things start to cave in. And I turn to my business owners, and I realize that they're getting depressed. You know, they can't get, people aren't paying them, the banks aren't lending them money. And with all these things that are going on, I remember walking into one client, and he said, look, Andy, I'm not going to pay you. And I had worked almost incredibly well with so many different people over the years. But what I found was that every so often you'd find somebody that truly was trying to take advantage of you and really not look at what the impact was going to be on yourself. And he looked at me and he said, Andy, what do you want me to do? Sell my Rolex to pay you? And I said, as a matter of fact, I drove by a pawn shop on the way here, and I'd be happy to drive you down. Now, the answer there was no, and this wasn't about paying me or paying his payroll. This was just simply greed. And I talk about this because what I found with business owners in my market is that as long as they're focused on greed as opposed to ego, they're fine. But this fellow here thought it wasn't about greed, it was about ego. It was about the fact that he couldn't see having to keep a promise, because who was I? And I learned that in this business, you have to differentiate, because greed is something you can funnel into basically achieving things that then people can choose not just to do well by, but to do good with. But for him, it wasn't that case. And I learned how to take someone to court and win, and I learned how to effectively, really, basically take care and do for yourself and do for your business what you really feel you need to. So what really made me start to come to terms with is, as things started to sink all the way around me, I had to do something. Well, I changed the game. I changed the game by going and moving to Pittsburgh. It wasn't my choice, but it turned out to be a fabulous choice, because what it was basically part of this giant defining point. Now, it was really tough on the way down, and I noticed that I lost three things. First, I lost my ability to prospect. I couldn't pick up the phone. I lost my ability to write content, to write new ideas, to be creative. And ultimately, when I was diagnosed with depression, I lost my ability to serve clients. And I find that with business owners, that was probably the most insidious impact, and probably is one of the bigger economic indicators, if you really get down to it, is that when a business owner, an entrepreneur, people like us, lose our will, lose our volition. I hear depression is defined as the ultimate boredom. You lose interest in everything. that it really, really is tough. And so here I was in a brand new town, and no one in Pittsburgh cares what you've done in Cleveland. Trust me, okay? All you have to do is say words like Steelers, or try to say that, oh, you're really not from there, or whatever. It doesn't matter. And I started thinking, what am I going to do? And I went back to my two sources of strength, my memories of running to the next telephone pole, and of course, my inspiration of Margot. Because at this point, Margot had been in the hospital for about 8 of the last 12, 15 months. And yet she fought and she fought and she fought. And nothing went our way. She went to a private school called the Ellis School, and for a giant fee that I was paying to have her go there, they wouldn't accommodate in any meaningful way because private schools don't have to have IEPs or 504B plans. So what happened was I was watching her fight in the hospital, and I was watching nothing really working out. And yet, you know, she'd have a great demeanor. She'd be really excited about it, and she'd make fun of me, you know. And I remember kind of probably the lowest point was there's one more low point, just when it couldn't get any lower. Here we are in Pittsburgh, and we're living in Shadyside, which is between the big hill called Squirrel Hill and the Allegheny River, and it's all downhill. And there was an enormous rainstorm, and the rainstorm actually killed 4 people, a poor mother and her 3 children, because there was a flash flood. Well, all of that water came through our basement and flooded our basement with the third of our belongings that had not fit when we downsized from the Gigundo house to where we lived in Pittsburgh. Around this time, believe it or not, my mother was dying and my father was 96. So we have a flooded basement. I'm running down to Florida, trying to deal with both of them. And my daughter texts me a picture of a foot-long rat that had evacuated the basement, coming in with the water, and had decided to live in our kitchen. And I thought, wow, you know, mom and dad, rat in the kitchen. Wow. So the next day, I'm in the cystic fibrosis ward with my daughter, and the chief of the whole cystic fibrosis ward starts telling me about all the ways I'm not taking care of her. And I finally looked at him and said, let me tell you what else is going on in my life. And I gave this whole litany of stuff. And he listens to this whole litany, and he looks at me and goes, you know, Andy, it really sucks to be you. And that was kind of one of those points. And I knew that I was coming back, because about 2 weeks later, this last January, I was giving a big speech. And I walked into 11:30. The host told me that 11:50, I was going to be interviewed by the local press on the topic, the Marcellus Shale topic I was speaking about at noon. At 11:40, my mother calls me and says, your father's dying, you want to say goodbye to him, here's the phone. So I did that at 11:40, was interviewed on TV on 11:50, gave the speech at noon and the workshop at 2. And I realized that I had come back. And what I've learned, if any of you ever have to deal with this, is that all the meds and all the therapy and everything around depression, I find that high achievers that get it, there's just like one day when all of a sudden it just seems to go away. People stop doing it, deal with it, and it moves on. And I hope that anyone that has to deal with that has the blessing that I had of just somehow finding that moment. So from that point on, it got really interesting. My prospecting came back. No, first of all, my client service came back, and I started landing some big, nice clients in Pittsburgh. I started doing a lot of writing, and obviously I was able to start prospecting. And it got really kind of fun because it was a brand new business, and it was a brand new place, and all the good I had done before and all the bad I had done before had been washed away because it just didn't matter for the small business market. And so as I got going in that, I tried some new things, and most of them, frankly, didn't work. I tried to work with non-business owners, not a good idea. I tried to work with nonprofits, not a great idea. I tried giving stuff away for free, didn't really work. But I started to find my mojo and my moxie again, and it started to really pick up. And you know, it's been a great deal of fun, because what I realized was that you may be part of communities or tribes or groups, but at the end of the day, you've got to dig deep and find it inside yourself. And I was really blessed to do that, because what happened as I got going is I focused back on the client and the market value and the markets that I knew I went after, and I focused on my best and highest use, calling the game, telling the truth, being willing to lose a client if I didn't believe that what the president was doing was what the owner needed, even if the president and the owner was the same person. I have learned how to basically change my whole business. Now, for those of you that are thinking about attending the workshop is going to be the steak if this is the sizzle. I'm going to go through all of the specifics, and there's going to be so much content that we'll barely get through that period of time. But I want to just give you, because those of you that can't make it, I want to give you just a sense of what I did to move my way back up. The first thing I did was I returned back to my best and highest use. What am I good at doing? What do I like doing? And what has the market valued me for doing? And I started to get back on my feet. And what I did, and I'll be very, very candid with you, when Gail invited me to speak, I think it was January or something, I said, I'm going to use today, I'm going to use this milestone as having my business back where I need it to be. And so in the last 7 months, I have basically re-racked my target markets. I now have 4 specific target markets: business owners, advisors who serve business owners, specifically those whose businesses was worth so much in 2008, and it's not worth it in 2012 because of the recession. I help them bring it back if they can't afford to retire or sell their businesses for what they need. I've been getting very involved in giving talks and providing content for meeting hosts and planners who host groups of business owners. And finally, in Western PA, there's something called the Marcellus Shale. It's a giant natural gas reserve that's been discovered that is expected to pump $1 trillion into the economy and create about 1 million jobs. So I went back to and remembered Economics 101, and $1 into the economy is $3 out, right? So I have a whole business now I've started of helping companies that don't know anything about the energy business to position themselves to sell to companies that sell to companies that sell to people in the gas business, okay? And that's going well. So that was the first thing I did. I created a whole new way of positioning my content. It's called 4 things a business owner has to do: run, fix, grow it, and prepare it to sell it. I created something called a growth potential indicator, which is an assessment that gathers information and provides somebody with a diagnostic on how their business could or should be growing. And I went forth and I looked and I created all new ways of thinking about how I'm going to grow my business. So as I start to look at the business and think about what comes next, I couldn't be more excited. I really couldn't be more excited. We live in a world here where we are small business owners. So all of you know what it's like. We live in a world where no one's really on the side of the small business owner. But what's so exciting is business owners as lone wolves, as long distance runners, really have a great opportunity to really, really do it themselves. And I think most of all, we have the opportunity to do it our way. I'm pleased to tell you that in the last week, my daughter Margot, who is now 16 and a half, just passed her driving test. And so now she has a chance to have some freedom, and she gets to do that as long as she does her meds and finishes her work at cyber school, because she has to be out of the home and work and gets educated at home. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that all of us here have our own Margos. You know, all of us here have our own challenges. I've met many of you here, and you've told me. We've heard some wonderful stories about folks have. But I would love all of you to really think about how can you reach out and grab your own best and highest use, what you're good at doing, what you like doing, and what the market has valued you for doing. Because in conclusion, if you remember our friend Vanderlei de Lima, by putting out his arms and winging there and aping his own misery, he won the Olympic sports award for highest sportsmanship, which is not even given every Olympics. And he is probably the most famous athlete in Brazil who doesn't play soccer or volleyball. And everyone remembers Vanderlei de Lima, and no one particularly remembers who won the marathon or who was second that last year. So in conclusion and closing, I'd like to wish you all to be your own Vanderlei de Limas and follow your own dreams. Thank you very much.